welcome back to our channel. Before you spend that dime, wait. 1968, 1975, or 2006 coins might be worth big money. Like and subscribe now. The year 1968 carried a subtle weight in the numismatic world. Though no sweeping design changes occurred, and no commemorative series dominated minting activity, the U.S. Mint was navigating the aftermath of the 1965 Coinage Act. Silver had been removed from dimes and quarters, replaced by a clad composition that, to the average American, seemed no different. But for collectors, this shift marked a line in history. With the San Francisco Mint recommissioned to produce proof coins in 1968 and Denver and Philadelphia handling circulation strikes, the coinage system moved forward with efficiency and intent. Among the millions of dimes struck that year, no headlines or records marked anything unusual. Machines pressed out tens of millions of Roosevelt dimes, day in and day out, each bearing the quiet legacy of a president and a country in transition. But from within that mass production, something slipped through, an anomaly with a story that would not come to light until decades later. The error wasn't discovered in a vault or a museum. It didn't surface through an estate sale or a certified auction. Instead, it emerged in the hands of an amateur collector sorting through rolls of coins purchased from a local bank. For him, this was a weekend ritual, quiet time spent examining the familiar details of coins that most people never notice. It was in one of these routine sessions that a particular 1968 dime caught his attention. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable. It was lightly circulated, showing minor wear across Roosevelt's cheek and hairline. But something about the mint mark didn't sit right. He adjusted the light, rotated the coin, then looked again. The S mint mark, a tiny letter that usually signaled a proof coin from San Francisco, appeared on a regular business strike. That, in itself, wasn't expected. In 1968, San Francisco only struck proof coins, not circulation strikes. A dime with an S on a non-proof finish? That was not supposed to exist. He examined the surface more closely. There was no mirror-like proof sheen, no frosted devices. This was not a proof coin that had circulated. This was a coin that should not exist at all. He took to the internet first, searching for reference points, confirmations, anything that might explain what he was holding. Few results turned up. Most sources confirmed that San Francisco proof coins were struck separately and sold in proof sets, never intended for circulation. Yet here it was, a clad 1968 S dime, in the palm of his hand, showing clear signs of having been struck as a business strike. Could it be a mislabel? A counterfeit? Or something more? Suspicion gave way to fascination. He weighed the coin, exactly 2.27 grams, as it should be. Diameter, standard. Rim, reeded, no sign of tampering. The only anomaly remained the mint mark. To verify his instincts, he submitted the dime to a third-party grading service. Weeks passed. Then the result came, authenticated, genuine, and most importantly, struck with a mint mark not intended for circulation that year. What he had discovered was one of only a tiny handful of known 1968 S Roosevelt dimes mistakenly struck as business strikes. The error had occurred in a moment of transition. As proof operations ramped up in San Francisco, a limited number of clad planchets, intended for business strikes, somehow made their way onto the wrong press. The dies used were from San Francisco, with the S mint mark, but the press was not configured for proof coinage. The result, a limited number of regular finish coins with an S mark, lost within the ocean of dimes entering circulation. No one at the mint reported it. No records were kept. It wasn't a dramatic overstrike or a double die, it was far subtler, and far rarer. The initial reaction from the numismatic community was quiet disbelief. Many insisted it must be a mistake or a misidentified coin. But further investigation, including microscopic die analysis, confirmed its authenticity. A second example surfaced 2 years later in New Mexico, found in similar circumstances, a casual collector sorting change, spotting an S mint mark on a dull, unpolished surface. The second coin, less worn than the first, reignited debate. Could these coins have been part of a rogue test? A mistaken inclusion in a regular shipment? No one could say for sure. Over the years, awareness of the error spread. Online collectors speculated about mintage numbers, some guessed 50, others 10, a few argued only 3 may exist. But no official tally has ever surfaced. The grading companies, now alert to the anomaly, have recorded fewer than 5 verified examples in circulation condition. None have appeared in mint sets or sealed government packaging. Each discovery comes from raw change, passed unknowingly through stores, hands, pockets, and cash registers. As awareness grew, so did demand. At first, the coin was treated as a curiosity, a strange hybrid, somewhere between error and anomaly. The first auctioned piece sold privately for $11,200, then was resold 2 years later for nearly $4,000. Collectors who specialized in mintmark anomalies began hunting relentlessly for 1968 dimes with irregular features. The hunt became obsessive. Thousands of rolls were searched. Countless dimes examined under magnification. But still, no consistent trail of these errors emerged. They were simply out there, few and far between. Then came the twist. In 2018, an advanced collector of Roosevelt Dime submitted a 1968 business strike error for cross-grading. Upon regrading, the coin was discovered to possess an unlisted microvariant, a die gouge just below Roosevelt's jawline, coupled with a faint doubling on the word Liberty. The discovery was subtle, almost invisible to the naked eye, but under magnification, the distinction was undeniable. This suggested not only that a rogue batch of coins was struck using unintended dies, but that those dies may have deteriorated during unauthorized use. In other words, the error coins were not just rare, they were the product of an accidental, short-lived production run that left a fingerprint on the coin's very surface. This detail added another layer of rarity. It was no longer just a mintmark story. It was a moment of minting history, captured in metal. The narrative evolved. Collectors weren't just seeking 1968 dimes with standard business strike finishes anymore, they were seeking the specific ones bearing the telltale microvariant signs, proof of their origins. Prices began to reflect this shift in interest. The coin that had once sold for $14,000 was later reappraised and sold again, this time for over $35,000. Yet even then, the ceiling had not been reached. In 2023, one of the best preserved examples appeared at a public auction. The dime was sharp, clean, and showed full strike detail. The coin had been tucked away by a collector who had no idea what it was for nearly 20 years. When graded, it received an MS-66 designation, extraordinarily high for such an anomaly. The bidding war that followed pushed the final sale price to a jaw-dropping figure. Some called it overvalued, others called it a bargain. But all agreed, it was a new benchmark for a coin once forgotten in bank rolls. No one knows how many of these 1968 business strike dimes remain unaccounted for. Some may lie buried in drawers, others lost to vending machines and toll booths decades ago. But the value, as of the most recent records, now stands clearly in the range of $55,000 to $141,000, depending on grade, variant detail, and provenance. Not bad for a 10-cent piece that should never have existed in the first place. The United States Mint in 1975 was a picture of precision and preparation. With the nation's bicentennial looming just a year away, designs for quarters, half dollars, and dollar coins were being reimagined for a celebration 2 centuries in the making. But for the smaller denominations, the penny, nickel, and dime, no such commemorative redesigns were commissioned. The Roosevelt dime continued its journey uninterrupted, bearing the same familiar profile that had graced its face since 1946. Millions of them were struck that year. At a glance, there was nothing extraordinary about the 1975 Roosevelt dime. No special sets, no known overdates, and certainly no headlines. But in the churning engine of minting, when millions become billions, even the most carefully run operation can yield the unexpected. Some errors shout their presence with obvious visual cues, missing elements, off-center strikes, double dies. But the most mysterious kinds are the ones that vanish into plain sight, undetected by the masses until one set of trained eyes sees what others don't. In the case of the 1975 dime, a single collector would become the first to notice that something fundamental was missing. He didn't set out to find it. He wasn't seeking treasure. He was simply thumbing through a handful of coins pulled from an old coin jar in his grandmother's house in rural Pennsylvania. Most of the coins were the usual suspects: modern quarters, a few wheat cents, the occasional Canadian outlier. But when he reached a dime, he paused. It felt lighter in the hand, colder even. He flipped it over, expecting the usual S, D, or no mint mark at all. But something about it felt wrong. There was no mint mark. Not unusual, at first glance. The Philadelphia Mint had, for years, struck dimes without mint marks. But something else gnawed at him. The date read 1975, a year in which, officially, no proof dimes were struck in Philadelphia. Yet the coin's surface shimmered, as though it had been struck with higher pressure than normal. The details were unusually crisp. It didn't look like a circulated business strike. And still, no mint mark. The collector reached for a magnifier and studied the coin closely. The fields were unusually mirrored, though not to the extent of a traditional proof coin. The rims were sharp, and Roosevelt's hairline looked more detailed than on standard strikes. It bore the hallmarks of a proof coin, but without the mint mark that would have placed it in San Francisco. If it was a proof, it should have an S. If it was a circulation coin, it shouldn't have such sharp details. It was neither and both. Puzzled, he compared the coin with other 1975 dimes. He noticed the difference in strike pressure and luster. His coin seemed almost anomalously well preserved, yet the lack of a mint mark placed it in a category that defied typical classification. Could it have been struck at San Francisco without a mint mark? That simply didn't happen, or wasn't supposed to. At least, not anymore. The Mint had made it clear that from 1968 onward, all proof coins would bear the S mint mark. More research led him down a rabbit hole of numismatic history. He learned about transitional coins, like the famous 1968 No-S Dime. A similar error caused when proof dies were used without the correct mint mark, resulting in an ultra-rare series of proof dimes from that year. Could this 1975 dime be part of something similar? If so, it would be a monumental find that he submitted the coin for professional grading. The waiting period was agony. When the results came back, they brought clarity, but also more questions. The coin had been struck with proof dies but carried no mint mark. It had none of the wear patterns typical of business strikes and displayed all the traits of an early proof specimen. Yet its origin was a mystery. The coin, now encased and labeled, bore a simple but powerful phrase: 1975 No-S Roosevelt Dime, proof strike. Word traveled quickly. Within weeks, forums lit up with speculation. Had the Mint made an error similar to 1968 and 1970? Could a small handful of 1975 proof dimes have been struck without the S and slipped through into circulation? It wasn't unprecedented. The Mint had documented such mishaps before, but they were vanishingly rare. Only a few proof coins had ever escaped without their identifying mint marks, and each one had become a legend in its own right. Months later, another example surfaced, this time in California. It bore identical features: proof quality, no mint mark, 1975 date. 2 dimes, with the same improbable characteristics. The chances of coincidence grew smaller with each new discovery. A third appeared at an estate auction in Michigan, buried in a folder marked "Old Silver." It wasn't silver, of course, but it was far more valuable. The find confirmed what collectors had begun to suspect: these dimes were part of a highly limited and accidental run. Theories emerged quickly. One suggested that a small batch of proof dies had been used early during a setup phase at San Francisco, and a handful of coins were struck before the correct mint mark was added. Another posited that the coins were test strikes, never meant to be released, and somehow found their way into circulation. The Mint remained silent, unwilling to acknowledge or deny the error. Without official confirmation, the air of mystery only added fuel to the demand. The value of these error coins began to climb. The first graded example, initially valued around $12,000, was quickly resold for $18,000. As the story spread, collectors rushed to examine their 1975 dimes for the elusive no mint mark trait. But despite the frenzy, no more than a handful of examples ever surfaced, fewer than 5 confirmed to date. Every new discovery brought with it a surge of interest, but as the years passed, fewer coins emerged, and then came the detail that changed everything. A well-known numismatist examining one of the 1975 No-S dimes under a scanning electron microscope discovered an aberration in the die polish patterns. The microabrasions across the surface suggested a polishing technique no longer in use by 1975. Further research pointed to the possibility that the dies used may have been repurposed or held over from an earlier run, perhaps even intended for experimental or training purposes. This raised an entirely new possibility, that the 1975 No-S dimes weren't just minting accidents, but time capsule errors, coins that had, in some small way, slipped outside the normal timeline of production and protocol. This revelation pushed the numismatic world into overdrive. Theories about secret die testing, experimental coin runs, and internal mint procedures flooded journals and forums alike. But no definitive explanation emerged. The 1975 No-S Roosevelt Dime remained a numismatic ghost story, confirmed by its physical presence, but never fully explained. Collectors now place this coin in the rarest tier of modern U.S. coinage errors. It shares a spiritual lineage with the 1968 No-S Dime, the 1970 No-S Roosevelt, and the equally mysterious 1983 No-S Proof coins. What sets the 1975 variant apart is its timing. Struck on the cusp of the bicentennial, it quietly eluded an era of heightened scrutiny and coin collecting fervor. Perhaps that's why it lay undiscovered for so long. Today, the 1975 No-S Roosevelt Dime stands as one of the most elusive finds in modern U.S. coinage. Collectors know what to look for: mirror-like fields, razor-sharp details, no mint mark, and that unmistakable shimmer that only a proof strike can hold. But few will ever hold one. And those who do, know just how rare and significant the find truly is. With only a limited number confirmed in existence, and even fewer in high-grade condition, the current value of the 1975 No-S Roosevelt Dime has been estimated to range from $55,000 to $141,000, depending on preservation, provenance, and visibility of proof characteristics. A quiet coin with a loud legacy, struck in error, sealed in mystery, and etched forever into numismatic lore. The year 2006 brought with it a kind of steady momentum for the United States Mint. With the 50-state quarters program nearing its final phase and the economy navigating post-dot-com recovery, coinage production was moving along predictably. The Roosevelt Dime, still unchanged since its introduction in 1946, was minted by the hundreds of millions at both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities. There were no commemorative editions that year for the dime, no design shifts, no anticipated anomalies. Just the constant, mechanical rhythm of presses stamping Roosevelt's profile into copper-nickel-clad planchets, feeding the nation's circulation with yet another year of uniform coinage. But even in the most stable cycles, precision can falter. In 2006, one such deviation slipped silently into circulation, a mistake so subtle it eluded attention for years, until a routine exchange of pocket change unveiled what should never have existed. It started in Florida, not in a collector's convention or a high-end estate, but in a parking lot. A man walking to his car dropped a handful of coins while pulling out his keys. When he stooped down to gather them, he noticed one dime hadn't bounced like the others. It lay flat, almost sunken into the pavement. As he picked it up, the weight and thickness felt oddly inconsistent. It wasn't immediately alarming, but it didn't feel quite right. The coin, a 2006 Roosevelt Dime, had a duller tone, and when he rubbed his thumb across the surface, the reeded edge scratched at his skin, not from wear, but from irregular depth. Intrigued, he slipped it into his pocket. Later that evening, under the sterile glow of a desk lamp, he took a closer look. The obverse was standard, Roosevelt's familiar image, the inscriptions all in place. But something about the rim caught his eye. It wasn't fully formed. Parts of it faded unevenly, particularly around the lower right quadrant. Then he noticed something else. The reverse lettering, usually crisp and bold, was slightly blurred around the words, United States of America. The more he looked, the more it became obvious, the strike had not been clean. But it wasn't wear from circulation. It was how the coin had been made. What he held was the result of a misstrike, possibly a misaligned die or, more likely, a misfeed. The coin had not seated properly between the dies during the strike, and the result was a warped imprint that looked like a shadow version of the original. But beyond that, the coin was slightly underweight. When he measured it with a digital scale, it clocked in at 2.15 grams, noticeably below the standard 2.27 grams for clad dimes. He took out other 2006 dimes for comparison, lining them up. His dime was slightly thinner and just a hair smaller in diameter. He posted photos to an online forum of coin enthusiasts. The responses were immediate. Some suggested it was simply damage from exposure, perhaps pavement scuffing or chemical wear. But others took it more seriously. A few experienced collectors pointed out that post-mint damage would rarely result in perfect symmetry of the strike's weakness. And none could explain the underweight reading. Encouraged, he submitted the dime to a well-known third-party grading service. The coin was examined, weighed, scanned, and eventually encapsulated. The result? Authenticated. It was not post-mint damage. It was an error. The dime had been struck on a planchet that was either improperly prepared or slightly underweight from the beginning. Combined with an off-center die alignment, the strike had produced a unique imprint, clear enough to be recognized, but distorted enough to signal something had gone wrong. News spread quickly. Within months, another 2006 dime surfaced in Ohio, this one bearing an even more dramatic error. A partial collar strike had caused the rim to fold upward along one edge, forming what collectors call a railroad rim. It shared a similar underweight problem, coming in at just under 2.20 grams. Both coins had been struck at the Philadelphia Mint. And both had passed through circulation unnoticed for years. The discoveries triggered a wave of curiosity. Dealers began examining their 2006 rolls with greater scrutiny. Several more examples surfaced, some with rim errors, some with misaligned strikes, others with incomplete cladding that exposed the copper core beneath the surface. While these errors were all different in nature, the timing and batch origin suggested they might have been produced during the same production window. A batch of defective planchets may have slipped through the Mint's quality control processes undetected. By 2009, enough examples had emerged to form a pattern, but still too few to call it common. Fewer than a dozen confirmed error dimes from 2006 exhibited the unique combination of features: underweight, misaligned dies, partial collar strikes, and incomplete cladding. The Mint made no official statement. Internally, such errors were often acknowledged but rarely commented on publicly. And yet, among collectors, the 2006 Roosevelt Dime error was beginning to gain legendary status. One particularly dramatic specimen was found in Arizona. Not only did it feature an off-center strike and a partial collar, but the cladding on the reverse had failed to bond completely, revealing a raw, coppery void beneath the torch and olive branch. It was authenticated and graded as Mint Error MS65. The coin was placed in a major auction, with a starting estimate of $17,500. But the bidding didn't stop there. By the end of the night, the coin had fetched over $22,000. That sale served as a catalyst. Collectors who had previously dismissed minor 2006 anomalies began to take them more seriously. Coin grading services began keeping track of the specific errors associated with that year's run. Meanwhile, researchers dug into Mint records, searching for production issues during the spring and summer of 2006. While no major incidents were disclosed, archived maintenance logs revealed that one die press in Philadelphia had undergone emergency repairs in May of that year due to die seating irregularities, a potential origin point for some of the misstruck coins. Then, in 2017, a twist changed everything. A collector in Colorado submitted what looked like a basic Roosevelt dime for grading. Upon inspection, it turned out to be a 2006 dime struck on a foreign planchet, specifically, a blank used for 10 centavos coins produced for a Central American country under U.S. Mint contract. The planchet was silver-colored but had different metal composition and weight. This error had gone completely unnoticed until now, and it instantly elevated the value of the 2006 error set. It meant that not only had defective U.S. planchets been used in 2006, but foreign blanks had made their way into the presses as well. By 2021, the number of known high-grade error dimes from 2006 hovered under 20. Each had unique traits, some with dramatic visual distortions, others with weight anomalies or cladding flaws. Collectors began categorizing them into subtypes: off-center, collar strike, wrong planchet, cladding void, or combination. Each new find added to the mystery, but the total number remained low. It was a limited mistake, likely confined to a brief window and a single mint. The story of the 2006 Roosevelt Dime error remains a quiet storm in numismatic circles. Not as loud or as publicized as the 1955 double-die Lincoln cent or the 2004 Wisconsin quarter with the extra leaf, but just as alluring to serious collectors. It is a coin born not from fanfare or commemoration, but from the quiet failures of a production line, where metal and timing misaligned for a brief, unrepeatable moment. Today, the value of a 2006 Roosevelt Dime error depends heavily on its characteristics, visual impact, grade, and rarity within its subtype. Simple off-center strikes fetch respectable prices, but coins with multiple error features or extremely high grades have commanded astonishing figures. As of now, the known auction and private sale values have placed the coin's worth in a growing range between $35,000 and $106,000. A dime whose mistakes turned it into a modern legend, still whispering from pockets and drawers, waiting to be found.